It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! And I can't do the jazz hands because Delilah's with me. Give everybody a good grumpy face, Delilah. You're the queen of grumpy face. Ready? Give everybody a good grumpy face. There's the grumpy. See, she's purring. And she still looks super grumpy. But you're not super grumpy, are you, Delilah? No. You hear? Yeah. That's the purrs. Yeah, see, so she really is happy. She likes the attention. But it is Feedback Friday. And, of course, the most popular video of the week was on the Ion Fury controversy. Guess which video got limited or no ads? It's funny, because when I watched the Appabend video on the same thing, he kept saying, I'm going to get demonetized. There were ads on his video. Ironically, for Game of Thrones. And the Game of Thrones TV show does way worse than anything we talk about on YouTube, but, demonetized. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that the legitimate discussion of this whole controversy gets demonetized. I did get demonetized. There's no way to fight it. So you know what's coming. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. It helps a lot. It means I can cover these topics that you guys care about and not have to worry about being hit by demonetization, because this month's been brutal. Thank God for Twitch. Twitch, we played Myst on Twitch yesterday, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Going back down memory lane. So we're going to continue. We're going to finish Myst on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, there will not be Twitch next week because I am going to PAX. The patrons got a behind-the-scenes sneak peek of some props and cosplay that I've been getting ready for PAX. And they'll get to see more next week. Behind-the-scenes magic. But yeah, I did a lot of silly voices on Twitch, but let's talk more about Ion Fury. I'm going to get demonetized again. If you can, kick a few bucks to Patreon, it's appreciated, because I do think these things matter. Like, one person gave me shit for talking about the whole thing before I had all the context. That's not how journalism works. You have to get a certain baseline context to determine if something's newsworthy. But continuing news gathering is you publish responsibly. That gives you the opportunity to get further context. People come forward after the original story, and you do ongoing reporting on it. And people did show me some additional screenshots. I did watch Appabend's video. And one person did correct me, and apparently the Void Point, the developer, has not backed down on saying it was taken out of context. It's the publisher, 3D Realms, that is making everybody go to sensitivity training. Now, as somebody who used to work in corporate media, sensitivity training is not a big deal. You get in trouble if you don't act like you're taking it seriously, but it's not a big deal. It's not an indoctrination. It's usually like half a day. That's it. You have to sit in this like classroom while somebody talks to you about sensitivity and microaggressions and all these things. And everybody kind of half pays attention. They go back to work and very little changes. That tends to be what happens with sensitivity training. It's a cover your ass move on the part of the corporation. So people who are concerned about the whole sensitivity training thing, these things tend to have no teeth. I do think that developers have to be really careful what they put on Discords. Why don't people just talk to each other anymore? I really, this is a part of the modern working world I do not understand. Yes, I go back and forth with people on like Twitter DMs and things like that. But when it comes to actually like plotting a project of any meaningful way, like voice chat or video chat is really useful, with chat follow-ups, like type chat follow-ups for like things you want to go back and reference. But talking about shooting the shit topics on Discord, I don't quite get it. I admit. I'm of an older generation. I don't understand these things. But having gone back through the additional context, I do not feel like I have complete context. Everyone involved here is still cherry picking. Now, apparently part of that is because some stuff got deleted. And so no one can go back and do like full captures of the conversation. That is what I've been hoping to see. Apparently that's not possible to get because stuff's been deleted. But the additional context I did see did back up the idea that things were taken out of context. For instance, the idea about the conversation about trans people was specifically about parents deciding for their children that they are trans. Now, for the record, this is just as bad as forcing your child to conform to a cisgender identity. Whenever the parents are putting undue pressure, or as we say in Canada, inappropriate pressure. We still get upset about these things up here. But if you're putting a lot of pressure on your kid to conform one way or another, you can undermine their sense of self. And this is true even if you're not trans, if you're just like a gender non-conforming kid the way I was in terms of my interests. Like it does affect you growing up, having everybody treat you like you're weird because you happen to like, Dungeons and Dragons and He-Man and Thundercats and video games instead of, girly shows. It was like She-Ra and Strawberry Shortcake, and I think My Little Pony crosses that line personally. My Little Pony is excellent entertainment for everyone. But not liking girl things. It does this weird distancing yourself. You feel a million miles away from the world. And I can only imagine what it's like to feel like you're in the wrong body you're in the wrong body, not just that your interests are different. That's gotta be something tough. So I still think that the language that the Ion Fury team, that Voidpoint, those developers used, they could do with understanding why that stuff is hurtful. Now, I understand that this stuff was not intended for public consumption, but I'm not necessarily sure that matters in the idea of the word mutilate, because you shouldn't be thinking, like I said, about gender confirmation surgery being mutilation. One commenter said it's the idea of taking a healthy functioning body part and making it non-functioning. I'm not gonna get into that noise. Everybody's choice for what they do with their body is their own choice. I do understand the concerns about addressing comorbid mental illness and being very, very careful about that. We have very strict procedures in Canada for gender confirmation surgery because of that. They want to make sure, which is fair. When you say someone is mutilating themselves, that is putting a judgment, and a trans person can be very hurt by hearing that people think that way about what they're doing to feel more like them. And keep in mind, not all trans people get the bottom surgery. That is a choice. This is why we use the term transgender instead of transsexual. So this idea that, you're not a real trans person unless you've had the surgery. It's tried to cut that down. But that's neither here nor there right now. People are people, and I just think I don't know why people are terribly interested. I think with the idea of children being involved, that adds a level of complexity, because people, decent people of all stripes have this need to protect kids, especially kids who were bullied or people who were abused as kids. You want to stop that from happening. Like, people get people kind of lose their minds when it comes to kids, and it's an understandable thing. I think some of it is probably physiological. It's like a lizard brain thing. But still, language matters. Now, this being said, you notice that I am just saying language matters. I think they should take, a little bit more effort in understanding why these sorts of things are hurtful. I'm not saying some of the insane things that were said on Reset Era, like the developers hate trans people or they want to see them dead or all this stuff. I didn't see any of that. Now, I do understand the argument that a lack of trans acceptance makes violence against trans people more likely. However, I think being aware of that and blaming people for, unintentionally perpetuating certain less than kind opinions. I don't think you can. That's not fair to hang on somebody out of stuff that this is all relatively new for a lot of people, and people are still learning. And I really do believe that if you're really truly interested in making life better for trans people everywhere, you've got to sort of be patient and understanding and allow people to make mistakes and not freak out. We're not at final boss in terms of some of these transhumanist concepts. We're still in tutorial. We're still in the tutorial level. And some people blow through the tutorial level. Some people have trouble with a jump dash in the tutorial level, right? For some people, understanding the whole idea of transgender people or even transhumanism in general, it's the Cuphead of tutorials for them in understanding these things. If you really want to bring people along, if you really want people to understand and behave in ways that make trans people more comfortable across the board, patience is essential. People can't be so afraid to speak. This is what happens when people are afraid to speak. They get in conversations that they think are private and they just spew this way. I don't get what such a big deal is. And like I said, I think a lot of their confusion, like a lot of the things they said, are totally understandable. You guys know I am a feminist. I don't have issues with them saying yes, it's a female playable character. There's no feminist overtones in this game. It's not a feminist game. It's just a female main character. Some people would argue that the inclusion of a female character, playable character, is inherently feminist. The developers aren't in that category, and this is fine because this is all basically philosophy. There's no rule book. There's no way we can confirm this stuff. I mean, even the definitions that regular people are working with suck, right? You saw that if you watched Lady Bits. You've all watched Lady Bits, right? Right? No, I'm being silly. But macro, because I think we've talked the micro to death. Just to be clear, I don't need people to identify as feminists. All I care about is that people feel like equality is important and that they are open to hearing how they could just, amend certain behaviors that unintentionally may cause problems. As long as people are in that boat, I don't care if they call their content feminist. I don't care if they, believe themselves to be feminist. I would like to get to a place where we don't need words like feminism because we are truly living in a just and equal society for everybody, and we don't have to keep fighting about these ideas of race and gender identity and sexual orientation and all that stuff. That's where I want to get to. So I'm not going to get hung up on this semantic shit. And anybody who does get hung up on the semantic stuff, I think they've either been taught really wrong. Sorry, people with liberal arts degrees. Or there's actually an authoritarian streak where it's not just that they care about treatment. They are incredibly invested in language and controlling people through language. That's just my opinion. I can't prove that. It's just anecdotal, having been doing this more than half my life now. So that gives me pause. It seems a lot of people are really concerned about the greater ramifications on developers. I think these things are kind of preventable. I do think that developers should not be crucified for stuff they do and say when they're potentially punchy, when they've been crunching, that they don't expect to be public speech. I don't think we should be too rough on people because it wasn't for public consumption. I do share concerns about these forums making these things out to be more than they are, to try to, I don't even know what. Like, I think this sort of PR for a game like Ion Fury, based on the subject material, it's the only reason I heard about the game, personally. So that benefited them. The fact that I'm even considering checking it out means they might get some money from me that they wouldn't have otherwise, because too many games to play. Too many. I'm so behind. But, so it doesn't hurt them based on the subject material. I think that I'm a big believer, and you guys have heard this if you've watched my content a lot, that we need to be more understanding and permissive. I won't say tolerant, though tolerant might be the right word. We need to be more tolerant of speech that bothers us, so that speech we like that may not yet be popular or has fallen sort of out of fashion is also permissible. And, this is where my age comes into it, because I remember when being pro LGBTQ plus, or like back then, gay rights, LGBT was kind of around, but yeah, it was gay rights back then. Apologize for the bi erasure. But it was dangerous. Like, people got violent, especially when you're in communities like mine that the church was heavily influential, and some churches were actively preaching homophobia. The idea that gay people were not deviant, the idea that gay people, oh God, deserved marriage equality, was an incredibly unpopular idea. And this is why I get really uncomfortable with this idea of unpopular equals bad. Let's scream people down and just roar instead of putting up a solid argument, because, LGBTQ plus rights are trendy now. They weren't always. And I remember when they weren't. And if free speech principles were as regressive then as they are now, I'm not sure the gay rights movement would have had the acceptance that it has, because we wouldn't have even been allowed to blaspheme the way we did. And this is why, as somebody who is supportive of hate speech laws in principle, we have to be very, very careful how those things are enacted. And I want to be clear, I'm in favor of hate speech rights in principle because it just makes it easier. You don't have to wait for a group to hurt someone. You can intervene when they're just hating people. And I don't necessarily think prison is necessarily the right solution. I think that what you have to do to get at hate is instill doubt in the ideology, in the hateful ideology. Because hate movements prey on fear. And so you kind of have to give these people who have been indoctrinated or quasi-indoctrinated a reason to question whether or not their sincerely held views are accurate. And you can't do that if you're coming across as a sycophant who will not hear contradictions or any criticism of your idea, right? You have to set an example of seeming comfortable with uncertainty. And I think anybody who's watched this channel for a very long time, I'm very comfortable with uncertainty. I'm happy to say I don't know all of it yet. This whole thing was a shining example. The way I was able to find out more is to admit I don't have all the information that I feel comfortable with to make a solid judgment on these points. And that's responsible, because then people can give you that information. And I just think there is a way to strongly stand up for the rights of various people without stepping on the rights of other people. And I am a big proponent of, my freedoms end where yours begin. My rights end where yours begin. And if anybody's being shouted down instead of appealed to based on, logic, reasoning, facts, even, emotional appeals that aren't incredibly hyperbolic, right? Emotional appeals can sometimes be, I listened to a podcast this week, it's called the Zodcast, where this guy, his name's Neil, so he goes by Neil before Zod online. He talked about how the first Black member of Parliament from Quebec, woman, I think named Maureen Jennings, could have gotten that wrong, but she talked about how she started as opposed to gay marriage at the time, or marriage equality, what they called gay civil unions, in same-sex civil unions in Canada. That was sort of the watershed before the court was like, there's no different, marriage is marriage. Because the only thing the state can deal with is civil marriage. But she went from a position of being opposed to it on religious grounds, because she had a deeply religious background as the descendant of, on her father's side, slaves from Alabama. The activists who kept working on her and kept having conversations with her and sometimes even arguments with her, appealed to the shared belief that all people are deserving of rights, and that one of the big dehumanizations committed against slaves is they were not allowed to get married and have those marriages recognized by the state. So that common understanding, that common experience of why it was important changed her mind. That's how effective activism works. If you just scream at someone to pay attention to you, they'll pay attention to you. You will not change their mind. You may actually make them more entrenched in their beliefs. And it's so funny that this was going on while I was listening to it, because I'm like, that's how you do it. You get people from different points of view and find commonalities so people understand things not just, rationally, not just in theory, but in their gut. And I know we're all nerds, okay? We all love, we don't necessarily need that gut acceptance that, more emotional people do. We're Vulcans, okay? I get it. I'm there. This is something I had to learn in my own communications with people, that even though emotional appeals are a logical fallacy, they are the access point for most people who do engage much more emotionally. And if you want to be effective, that's something to keep in mind. Tone matters, an emotional connection, a feeling that people get that you are like them, and therefore it's a it's an in-group conversation, and so people don't have to be so much on their guard. This is super important to getting common understandings, including about video game stigma, including about mental health stigma, all this stuff. And this is some of the stuff I'm working on that you will never see on this channel. You have to subscribe to the FU podcast. I'm a panelist there. I talk more about politics and everything like that there. I want to keep the stream separate because, gaming is a place that people of all political stripes should come and feel like, not that everybody's in agreement. God, no, I think this is the question for the week. Do you feel uncomfortable, as I do, when everybody seems to be agreeing too much? I know this is really weird for a YouTuber, I know, but when I have a week of like solid 90s approval, I get weirded out. I don't think that's healthy. The Ion Fury video, the first one, dipped to 87%. I'm like, all right, did something right. Made people think. Because some people, when you make them think, they just dislike, scary, painful thoughts. This isn't really happening. I'm not like that. If something is well argued and not, off the deep end, or not all this ridiculous, like the guy, this guy on Twitter, if you have ever supported Trudeau, you hate Canada. Like, that's just ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous. That's, I think, as ridiculous. I do not even believe that, people, if you support Trump, you hate America. Well, that's foolish too. Everybody has a different idea of what America or Canada means. Some people believe America or Canada is just a location on a map. Other people believe that there are founding principles and ideals, and, to be a true patriot, you have to live in accordance with those ideals. But stop, you're both right? So there's no right or wrong answers there, and just saying, why do you hate puppies? Basically, you disagree with me. Why do you hate kittens? These mother's milk arguments. Do you guys feel the same way I do, that if there's that kind of stuff going on, you're uncomfortable? But if there's too much agreement, you're also uncomfortable? Let me know. I want to know if this is just me, because you may have noticed I am very strange. Okay. That's probably a good place to stop. Have a really good weekend. And again, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.